Human behavior is the potential and express capacity of human individuals or groups to respond to internal and external stimuli throughout their lifetime. Behavior is also driven in part by thoughts and feelings which provide insight into an individual's psyche, thus revealing attitudes and values. A famous philosopher Plato says, and I quote, "Human behavior flows from three main sources: desire, emotion, and knowledge." However, the pursuit of some desires could have grave consequences on the individual the action stems from, and even the society he or she lives in. On this edition of Frontiers, we will be taking a look at the rising cases of drug abuse amid the coronavirus pandemic. I am Obiageli Ugoke, and our guest is the President, African Council on Narcotics, Mr. Repene Bassi. You're welcome to Frontiers.
It's my pleasure.
We shall be back in a moment. Stay with us. Our impression is that there is a prevalence in drug abuse during this COVID-19 pandemic. What's your take on that?
Well, my take would be that it is possible, but we can do a reflection of previous statistics. And the last time I checked, the National Bureau of Statistics had carried out a national survey, and it showed that about 14.3% Nigerians of a population of about 260 million are involved in the abuse of illicit substances. But I think more current the more current statistics, if surveys are carried out, may reflect higher figures. And the perception is that presently about 15% of individuals between age 15 to 62 are involved in the abuse of illicit substances, from alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs. And that would be about 40 million Nigerians, which is a staggering figure and very disconcerting, very disturbing. If you take that a little further, you see a reflection of that in terms of, it affects, sociological consequences. A lot more cases of rape, a lot more cases of crimes like kidnapping, crimes like armed robbery, militancy, crimes like banditry, and even terrorism and insurgency. All, have a correlation with, substance abuse. So, and within this period, people who, for example, have felt, this depressing boredom, have had only one thing to keep themselves together, perhaps, and that is plenty of alcohol, for those who can afford it, and a lot of, smoking of tobacco, and the use of, easily available substances like, marijuana or cannabis sativa. So I think that, because of boredom, because of, depression, people, tend to want to keep themselves a little bit, active with these drugs, keep themselves psychoactive, these are psychoactive substances, so they want to keep themselves active using these substances.
It's true, because we've seen some statistics showing also that there is rise in the use of alcohol during the COVID-19 lockdown. And you made mention of cases such as rape,
yeah,
other abuses. Is this also related to drug abuse? When
people set themselves on edge, with psychoactive substances, whether they be narcotic drugs or psychotropic substances, there's a tendency for them to want to venture into, several things. And if you understand the fact that date rapes are related to substance abuse, then it shouldn't be difficult to understand why, when people are under the influence of drugs, their libido tends to heighten it somewhat. And what that means is that if a man has taken or consumed, some illicit substance, and then experiences some stimulation, in terms of, an increase in libido, and finds a woman who says no, there's a tendency for, him to want to apply force. I know a lot of women under the influence of drugs are not likely to give consent to sex. So what then happens is that the man probably applies, force. And, what is rape? Rape is having sex with somebody without consent, with a woman without consent, or it could be man or woman, whichever the case may be, without consent.
Yes.
Once there's no consent, and this is done under force, the use of force, either to harm or to by use of intimidation or any means that subjects the other party to submission, would amount to rape.
According to statistics, more than 35 million people suffer addiction from drugs. What do you think is responsible for this sudden rise? And it's not just something that we're seeing in the past. This is a statistics based on the 2020 release from UN Office on Drugs and Crime. Well,
for a lot of reasons, if we take the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of people have lost their jobs. A lot of people are unemployed. If those who were employed, lost their jobs, they are bound to be depressed. A lot of people are not even sure where the next school fees for their children would come from, where their next house rent will come from, where the next money to pay water bill will come from. A lot of people are not sure how they're going to send their children back to school. So you have people, who are suffering from a lot of mood disorder. And mood disorder is a risk factor for substance abuse, just as substance abuse can lead to mood disorder. So such depressive tendencies, are steering people into becoming, desiring to use more and more drugs. And I think that for the most part, quite apart from those who would take drugs due to peer group pressure, like younger people who, when they are in the company of their friends, find it almost irresistible to do what their friends are doing, because their friends would not consider them to have become properly initiated, an integral part of them, so must do what their friends are doing. Quite apart from that, even the environmental factors, a lot of young people take drugs because their parents take drugs. And then there are those who take drugs out of adventure. There are those who take drugs because until they take drugs, they can't perform certain actions. So essentially, drug abuse is a biopsychosocial problem. So there are people who, depend, biologically, on the abuse of illicit substances, psychoactive substances. And then it comes to a time when, they can't perform, certain functions, whether it be, coming up the stage or even appearing on the clag light of television, to have a conversation, to make a presentation without the influence of drug. And those who believe they can't go into the sporting arena without the influence of drug. There are those who believe that they can't go up the stage to sing except they have taken some drug, And after a period of time, the body gets so used to it, to the extent where, psychologically you just become so dependent and believe that you just can't do without this drug. So you become biopsychosocially dependent upon the drug. And it's important to mention that there are several neurotransmitters, in the neurosystem. There are about over 40 neurotransmitters in the neurosystem. And most drugs act directly on the central nervous system, CNS. So you have drugs that are, central nervous system stimulants, central nervous system depressants, central nervous system perturbatives. Now, of the over 40 neurotransmitters in the brain, about 8 are very, very active, but 2 more are even more active. Dopamine and serotonin. So when an individual takes drug, it acts directly on dopamine. I know the dopamine, is a pleasure center. And immediately after, about 15 minutes after the drug has been used, particularly highly addictive drugs like cocaine and heroin, 15 minutes after, the pleasure is so intense. I mean, 15 minutes, within the period of 15 minutes, the pleasure is so intense. And soon after that, it wears off. And then the other neurotransmitter, serotonin, craves for replenishment. And the interaction of a drug on dopamine and serotonin, is what causes or creates, the process of addiction. So the person becomes addicted and therefore psychosocially dependent upon, substances for survival. That's the, how the addiction process, comes about.
In terms of this addiction, are there measures that could be employed to tackle such?
Of course, there are a lot of
helping these victims.
Of course. You have there are treatment protocols in treatment and rehabilitation centers where victims can undergo treatment, whether it be through the 12 steps processes or detox processes and counseling and medical. There are available medical services for treatment of drug-dependent persons. Yes, for addiction. Yes.
Okay, now from your findings, what drugs top on the list of drug abuse in Nigeria and on the African continent?
Well, let's talk about Nigeria. The most commonly abused and available drug in Nigeria is cannabis sativa, which is popularly known as marijuana. Some people call it pakpa or igbo. It's almost everywhere, every nook and cranny.
In Nigeria, yes.
In all the inner cities, the villages, every nook and cranny in this country, you will find that. So it's everywhere. And remember, I had mentioned earlier that people probably don't recognize the fact that alcohol and tobacco are also drugs. Even kola nut, and these are gateway drugs and usually lead to the use of those other drugs, because the individual who takes kola nut or alcohol or tobacco, over a period of time craves for higher level of activeness, psychoactiveness. They tend to want to, and sometimes when they get introduced to those other drugs, tend to want to also experiment them and then get hooked to them. Next to cannabis, presently would be, particularly in Nigeria, would be, tramadol. There's so much use of tramadol and codeine amongst young people. And these are drugs that are sourced from pharmaceutical shops, patent medicine stores and all that. Then there's also the use of crack, particularly cheap crack, in a lot of cities, and cocaine. Heroin is also used. And talking about Nigeria in particular, a whole lot of other places, you'll find young people also using these other substances like heroin, codeine, methamphetamines, and others.
Now, how do abusers tend to get these drugs? Because in trying to curb this scourge, you will believe with me that there should be a way of limiting their access to some of these drugs.
Drugs get into the hands of abusers through drug pushers, drug traffickers who source them through barons. And you have several international drug cartels around the world. And a whole lot of these cartels have tentacles all over the world. Cartels like Wosinwo, Kalai Cartel, Golden Triangle, Golden Crescent, the KKK, even the Mafia Commission, all of them, and it's big business for them, like Jamaican Pose and several others. They not only, manufacture these drugs, they smuggle, they have, smuggling channels around the world. In our case, for example, we have very huge air, land, and water borders.
Now, what are the symptoms of
Several symptoms.
abuse?
Several symptoms. If we take children, constant red eyes, colored tongue, dirty habits, dirty fingernails, aggressiveness, a lot of abusiveness, stealing. You see, things begin to get missing in the house. They steal to get the means to acquire the drug. And sometimes for children, for example, when they won't let you enter their room, whereas you would easily have access to them, enter their room, and they no longer want you to enter their room. When they isolate themselves, they are no longer interested in family matters. They're no longer interested in sporting activities, and all such events that usually give them excitement and pleasure. When they begin to perform very poorly in school, in their schoolwork, when when they go out at odd intervals, and you do not know when they come back. They don't want when they will not tell you where they are going to or what kind of friends they are going out with. They want family members to know all that, and these are all some of the symptoms of substance abuse.
We'll pause here for a while. I'll get back to you. You're in Frontiers, and it continues in a moment. It's glad to know you're still there. Now, everything we do as individuals has its good or grave consequences. In terms of health challenges, what health challenges could one
a lot of health challenges. Apart from mental illness, you have mood disorders. I mentioned aggressiveness. We're talking about health consequences.
Challenges, yes.
Challenges, yes. Yeah. For the most part, a lot of the people, you see out there who have mental challenges.
Records have shown also some people having a mental issues.
Exactly, a lot of it. Unfortunately, in Africa, we're working on a project like that to show clearly that there is a correlation between substance abuse and mental illness. In Africa, it's believed that mental illness is a consequence of evil spirits. So,
exactly.
but the truth is that a lot of mental disorders are related, or cases of mental disorders are related to substance abuse. And then a lot of people who take marijuana, for example, men suffer from crippled sperm, so they are not able to, impregnate, their wives.
I wonder if they are aware of the health consequences.
And then for students, it affects short-term memory. They are not able to, retain what they have been taught in school, so they can reproduce it during exam or soon after. Immediately after they get taught, they soon after forget what they have been taught. There's several health, consequences, apart from the fact that, a lot of people who come under the influence of, psychoactive substances, are very susceptible to, sexual violence, and sexual violence can lead to unwanted pregnancy. It can lead to sexually transmitted diseases like HIV and AIDS. So several health consequences are related to. Can lead to heart failure, can lead to kidney failure, it can lead to lung failure, and several, a lot of the drugs are, carcinogenic, can lead to several types of cancers, cancer of the throat and esophagus, several health challenges.
Okay, now, we have the NDLEA as well as NAFDAC as government agencies that are saddled with the responsibilities of managing and tackling this problem. Is there any form of collaboration between your organization and some of these agencies?
Yeah, well, the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency in the past, worked very closely with a lot of non-governmental and non-profit institutions, okay? The African Council on Narcotics had occasion to collaborate with the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency. And we presently are looking at the possibilities of stirring up, opening up, other valves of collaboration. NDLEA, NAFDAC, not at this moment with NAFDAC, but African Council on Narcotics is one of the several institutions that are listed, to work with the ICPC, So to that extent, it is to that extent that we, collaborate with some of the official institutions, particularly in Nigeria. Elsewhere, we looking at, opening up, talks and discussion with, similar institutions as we look to setting up the offices of the African Council on Narcotics elsewhere in Africa.
Okay, with all this support and all these struggles by the federal government agencies and then that of your own agencies, would you say there is any impact in terms of reducing the cases of drug abuse?
Well, I do not know how we can immediately measure the impact at this moment, but I can tell you that if we do not continue to proselyte, continue to preach, continue to do advocacy, continue to campaign against substance abuse, at this rate, substance abuse will destroy us. We must either destroy it or we fold our arms and continue to wait and it destroys us. But God forbid. What I want to say is for the statutory government institutions like National Drug Law Enforcement Agency and the and NAFDAC, they need better funding because they are not only underfunded, they are grossly understaffed, and they lack the they do not have the structural measures or equipment to effectively prosecute this war. So, and in fact, from available information, it looks like NDLEA have a staff strength of about just 4,000 plus operatives. Yes. 4,000 plus. And for me, that's grossly inadequate. And the last time I also checked, I found out that NDLEA is so grossly underfunded to the extent that what they get monthly, to prosecute this war is less than about 30 million naira. Compare that to 51 billion US dollars in the United States. So they're so grossly understaffed, so grossly undertrained, so grossly underfunded, so grossly under-equipped. How do you expect them to go about their job effectively? 4,000 plus operatives compared to a population of about 106 million Nigerians.
No, there's a gap.
There's a
huge gap.
Big gap. It's difficult for the for the necessary impact to be made, for effectiveness. Difficult. Oh, okay. Absolutely difficult.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Bassey, for sharing your thoughts again with us.
My pleasure. Always my pleasure.
We really do appreciate you.
My pleasure.
We wish you more support
as
you add your voice in fighting.
It's my pleasure.
I have been speaking with the President, African Council on Narcotics, Mr. Bassey, on the rising cases of illicit drug use in Nigeria. Remember, coronavirus is spreading in many communities, so ensure you observe all hygiene and safety protocols to stop further spread of the virus. I am Obiageli Gweke. Thank you very much for staying with us.